Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome back once again to this channel. So while we wait for the GoPro Max to come out in a couple of weeks, I have been trying out another camera that I've had actually for quite a few months now. However, when I first got it, it really just wasn't ready to be reviewed, to be quite honest. It had great hardware, but the software just wasn't ready. Then yet another company that released before it was ready. The camera I'm talking about is the Pilot Era. Here it is. It's a professional 360 camera. 4 lenses, can shoot 8K 360 video. Its unique selling feature is the fact that it also has a screen, which is about to come on now because I've just turned it on now. So like I said, I've actually had possession of this camera for quite a few months now, but when it was first released, I tried it out and it just was not good. So I thought I'm just gonna wait because it's quite an expensive camera and I'm just gonna wait to see how it goes if they release any more software updates to improve it. And the company that produced this camera, Pisoftech or something like that. It's a really weird name. This is a weird name for a camera. Anyway, weird names all around. But anyway, they did release some software updates and it massively improved the overall specs of the camera and it makes it actually usable now. So we can see here it has a giant screen at the front. It runs a version of Android, almost like a phone. It can shoot 8K 360 video at 24 frames per second, 6K at 30 frames per second, and 4K at 60 frames per second. It can also shoot 360 photos at a resolution of 8192 by 4096, which is pretty big for a all-in-one camera. The aperture is f2.4, it can shoot HDR photos, it has 4 microphones with full ambisonic audio. Most interestingly, this camera doesn't require anything else to stitch the videos and photos that it shoots. It can do it all internally. It features 4 gigabytes of internal RAM. It has 512 gigabytes of internal memory. So basically what that means is you can shoot 8K video using this camera and it will stitch automatically inside the camera itself. Then you can just take that file, put it on your laptop and PC and it's ready to edit. So you don't need to do that extra process like you do with most professional cameras or most 360 cameras in general, where you have to stitch that footage together using a special program. So that is a pretty big advantage compared to many other professional cameras. So let's take a look at some footage shot with the Pilot Era. I have been out shooting with it in all the resolutions it can offer in all types of environment. Now, while I just mentioned that you have the option of stitching the video in the camera itself, you also have another option where it stitches automatically. You don't have to even press a button on the camera itself. It just does it automatically and is automatically ready to view straight away. However, the issue with that is that when you shoot 8K in this mode, it only shoots at 8 frames per second, which is pretty much unusable. I mean, it's fine if you just want to preview what the image is going to look like, what your video is going to look like, but for a final product, I would not recommend doing that. I would recommend always shooting with the unstitched option. This shot here is shot in 8K at 24 frames per second in the daytime. Well, as you can see, it's very, very sunny. It's just about to be sunset. I thought this might be a bit of a challenge for the lenses to see how well they handle this kind of very intense sunny environment. But to be honest, I think it looks good. The image is sharp, the image is colorful. You don't really see the stitching lines, even though one lens is obviously getting a lot of sunlight. But all in all, I would not say this matches up to some other professional cameras that we have out right now, like the Insta360 Pro 2 and the Kandao professional lineup of cameras. They can shoot very, very high quality, high dynamic range footage, whereas I don't think this quite matches up to that, but the resolution is as high as they can do. But it's a matter of the quality of the lenses. The quality of the lenses in the Pilot Era are not great. They are still kind of quite basic lenses, but the fact that there are 4 of them and the fact that you can shoot high resolution means you do get that sharpness, but you don't necessarily get the same quality dynamic range and same quality in terms of color and white balance, that kind of stuff, that you would get in a camera that costs twice as much as this one. So we can compare it now, this 8K footage to 6K, and you don't really see much of a difference. And remember, when you shoot in 6K, you do get that extra 6 frames per second or more. It's 30 frames per second when you shoot in 6K, and I do think you do notice that in moving objects look a lot smoother. I don't really notice a huge amount of difference in terms of video quality between 8K and 6K, so maybe it may be a good idea to just shoot in 6K to get that extra frame rate. But it still looks good. I still think it looks pretty sharp, especially compared to the consumer 360 cameras, which definitely would not be able to get the same quality as you're seeing here. Right, so here is some more footage shot in the maximum resolution 8K, and again, very sunny, very kind of orange-red environment. You can see details in the distance, you can see there's not much fuzziness, there's not much blurriness in the edges, which is what you usually get with 360 cameras. So the 8K does make a huge difference. It does look very, very sharp. Now let's have a look at 4K just for comparison, and you can see here the massive difference. So this is a 4K footage, again shot with a pilot error, but it's got a higher frame rate and you can see people moving, it looks a lot smoother, but it's so much more blurred, you can't see as many details, it just doesn't look as good really, does it? Hopefully you can see the difference here between the 8K and the 4K, it is quite a huge difference. So again, here's some more footage in 8K, I'm going to put all of these together in a kind of compilation and I'll upload them in 8K. The only thing I can point out here is that it's a little bit slanted, as you can see. It's not quite, the horizon isn't quite level. So it does seem that the stabilization doesn't work quite as well as it should. That should be something that they work on. Kind of disappointing. But just for shooting still video, the resolution is very high and it looks pretty good. Okay, so we're moving on now to a lower light settings, and you're starting to see some fuzziness in the ground, especially where it's very dark. Now this is the main issue with this camera that I found, that it works well in the daylight, it works well when there's a lot of even sunlight and even brightness, but when it gets dark, when there's any kind of darkness, it really does struggle. It gets very fuzzy, there's a lot of noise, it does not deal with the dark areas very well. That is going to be the main difference between this camera and other more expensive professional cameras. Those more expensive professional cameras work better in low light settings, low light conditions, whereas this one just does not, because the quality of the lenses is not that high. Now finally, here is a very low light environment, and this is literally the center of London, the geographical center of the city, shot after sunset, so pretty much as dark as it's going to get. Obviously a lot of artificial lights, but as you can see, it does not deal with it well at all. I don't know what that flashing is. It's just the camera really struggling to deal with very dark areas, and as you can see, pretty much unusable footage because of that flashing. Looks really weird. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, it's very noisy, very fuzzy. It's way darker than it was in reality. But yeah, so in low light or in darkness, this camera is not going to work very well, but in the daytime, it will do a decent job. So when it comes to video, works great in the daytime, works great when there's sunlight or bright or any kind of brightness. However, in dark conditions, it's gonna struggle a lot. So bearing in mind, this camera is around about $2,500, I do believe, the last time I checked. So for a professional camera, that's pretty cheap. However, as you can see here, it does have its drawbacks, so bear that in mind. If you were thinking you're just going to shoot in daytime, you want 8K footage, this is probably going to be the best value camera for that right now. Let's take a look at some photos now, because this is something that the camera is quite good at. It shoots very high resolution 360 photos all in one, so you only have to shoot one shot and it captures the whole thing in a very high resolution. So that could be good for virtual tours, for real estate people who want, you know, quick, high quality 360 images to use for their virtual tours or for their, you know, businesses or whatever. So let's have a look at the photos coming out of this camera. I tested both indoors and outdoors, so we can have a look at some indoor shots. And I think it does a pretty good job. There is kind of even lighting, the brightness you can see on the outside, it doesn't like overexpose the brighter areas. It looks like it could have been shot with a fairly basic DSLR. There are some issues with stitching. You can kind of see some stitching lines and some kind of wobbliness in the straight edges. But overall, I think it does a decent job. Now, there is also an option to shoot HDR photos. So that's 3 exposures in one, and it does it all automatically in the camera. So we're going to take a look at the difference between HDR and non-HDR. So this is non-HDR, just a normal photo. And then if we just drag in the HDR, as you can see, a lot brighter, a lot more dynamic range. It looks just, I guess, more attractive in my eyes anyway. However, anything that moves is going to be blurry. So I was blurry here, and there are some more stitching issues, as you can see there on the ground. So we can take a look here at a photo in those low light conditions. Now this is non-HDR, and as you can see, again, pretty much useless, really struggles in low light. That is not how dark London is at any time of the day. It just really struggled to see any kind of light in that image. But in the HDR shot, it does a lot better. So that's more like it really. That is pretty much how it looked in reality. But again, anything that moves is going to be a little bit blurry, and there are some more stitching issues. So it's kind of, you know, it's annoying, because if they'd sorted out the stitching issues, it would be a great camera for HDR photos, but it doesn't seem to be quite there yet. So that's pretty much all the footage I've got to show you from the pilot era. I mean, I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think. I personally think 8K in daylight, it does a really good job, especially for the price of the camera. It can match up in those conditions to much more expensive professional cameras, but it's just in any other environment, it's going to struggle because these lenses, while there are 4 of them, they are just quite low quality, cheap lenses. It's just the fact that there are 4 of them and they can combine together to shoot very high resolution. But these, you have to bear in mind, are like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, whereas this is about $2,500. So that's what you're giving up basically to get this cheaper professional camera. Now, I will say there are some quite big advantages for this camera, regardless of the footage and the video. You have this screen. Obviously, you can control pretty much anything straight from the screen. You can view your images and videos straight away. You can play them back on the screen itself, which is a huge advantage compared to other cameras where you need to either upload them to a laptop, a desktop, your phone, stitch them together, wait for ages. It may not play back as well. You may have to wait literally hours till you see your footage, whereas in this camera, you can see it straight away. So that is quite a big advantage. There's also another cool little accessory which you attach to the bottom, which allows you to record continuously. It allows you to plug the camera in to a power point and you can pretty much record for as long as you want. You can live stream with this camera in 4K for as long as you want. There is an Ethernet cable, there is a SIM card attachment. So you have so many options of how you could film, how you could live stream. You could do it continuously. You could do it in a place where you could do it over 4G. You could do, all this kind of options, which some other cameras don't have. And for the price is quite a lot of features in one camera. Now, what I'll say this camera is not for is it's not going to compete with the Insta360 Pro or the other major professional 360 cameras that are out right now, because it just doesn't have the quality in the lenses and it just doesn't work well in low light. I still think it's a good camera. It's come on leaps and bounds in the past few months with software updates. There's still some things that can be done to make it better. That is the Pilot Era. I will, like I say, upload a compilation of all the footage that I just showed you in the 360 format in 8K, and you can take a look at that another day, so subscribe if you want to see that. And I've got the GoPro Max review coming up in a few weeks. That should be cool, so yeah, check that out. But until next time, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you around. Bye.